Okay, so what does it actually cost to live in London in 2023? To catch transport, to pay for groceries, to have a little bit of fun and eat out and do some activities, and to pay for rent and utilities. This is what I spend in a week as a 27-year-old living in London. And if you are new around here, welcome. Hi, my name is Jess and I am a Kiwi who has been living in London for like over a year now, and I make videos all about London life and travel and food, which you will see is a significant portion of my spending habits. In this video, we're going to cover 3 categories for my weekly spending. Number 1, fixed costs. Number 2, subscriptions. And number 3, the juicy part, variable costs. But before we get into it, let's just set a couple of expectations. Firstly, why make a video like this? And for me, I just want to add to the information out there about the reality of what it is like to live in London right now. One of my biggest tips in all of my moving abroad content is to please do your due diligence and research on what it actually costs to live in the destination that you want to move to. And for me personally, one of the most helpful pieces of information out there were these What I Spend in a Week videos, but with 2 big caveats. Number 1, timeliness. Because of cost of living and inflation increases, making sure you're watching current What I Spend in a Week videos is going to be the most helpful thing to get an accurate picture of the cost of living in that destination. Number 2 is life stage or lifestyle. It's not going to be super helpful for someone who is a decade into their career to watch a What I Spend in a Week of a student living in a city, and vice versa. You want to get a clear idea of what your sort of living circumstances would look like in that destination. So finding people that you can broadly relate to in terms of maybe how far into your career you are or what you prioritize in life is quite important. And on that note, here's what I spend in a week as a 27-year-old living in London. Let's talk fixed costs, because this will give you a good idea of the baseline cost of living in London. Firstly, let's just get the biggie out of the way, and that is rent. This is the most sizable part of my fixed costs. Luckily, I do split this with my husband. So for me, it is £256 a week. And that gets me a well-sized, although old 1-bedroom in Zone 2, which I think is worth it because it does cut down the cost and commute time as well. But if you want to sort of know more about flat hunting in London, I have done a full tips video on it, and I will link it up here somewhere. Next up, we've got utilities and essentials. So those are things like gas, internet, electricity, water bill, your phone, and council tax. This week, my gas and electric cost me £10.60, and that is pretty average for spring, but do keep in mind that it does go up in winter about 40 to 50%. And my council tax is pretty fixed at about £24.20 this week, which is obscene. I can't believe that council tax is more expensive than my gas and electric, but this is 2023. Apparently. Our water bill we pay for annually, so that's about £3.30 per week for me. Our internet is £2.25 a week for me, and my phone bill is £2.50. And I actually think the phone and internet pricing is really reasonable here compared to what I used to pay in New Zealand, so that is at least a win for me. You've then got groceries, which I will controversially say are much more cheaper here in the UK than they are in New Zealand, even in London. And what we tend to do is one sort of big Asda shop per month. We get this delivered, and that costs me about £11.50 per week for like my basics, all the things for the freezer, all the standards for the pantry, those types of groceries. But we do our fair share of top-up shops per week at smaller sort of local convenience stores. And unfortunately, one of our closest convenience stores is M&S, and we all know I just cannot be trusted in an M&S, so that's a very long way of me saying I spent £31 on top-up shops this week, and I'm not exactly proud of it. You can do groceries a lot more cheaply and frugally if you plan ahead, but I just find London is one of those places where it's a bit hard to plan ahead. You don't kind of know when you're going out and when you're going to be home, so it's a little bit easier for me to shop a bit more ad hoc at these convenience stores. And lastly, public transport. I spent about £32 this week, and that covers me going into the office a couple of times and going out and about on evenings and weekends. And I feel like this is kind of average. It is about what I was spending when I was living in New Zealand, except then I was paying for public transport, keeping up the sort of maintenance of my car, and then petrol as well, probably more on that too. So I feel like it kind of evens out, and the nice thing about London is that it is a very walkable city. So if something is like just a couple of tube stops away, I will often opt to walk it rather than get on transport. Now for a part that I guess is kind of like a fixed cost, and that is subscriptions. First up, we've got ClassPass, and I spend £9.75 a week on it, and that gets me about 2 classes per week. I first signed up for this when I moved to London because I wasn't quite sure what studios I wanted to go to, so it was a great way to try out a bunch of different places, but I've actually ended up just keeping it because I find it's a bit more competitively priced than getting a package deal at some of the studios in London, and you can go wherever you want with it, which is really nice. So I'll put a little link to ClassPass in the description, not an affiliate link, but if you do sign up, I get some credits and I get to go to more yoga, which, you know, when you're living in the bustle of the city is a much needed relief. So link to ClassPass in the description. I then have some fun subscriptions, so Spotify Premium, because like I just cannot do the ads, so £1.30 a week for my share of that is really, really worth it. And then Hey You, because we have to keep up with the Bravo drama, and that's only £1.25 a week. And lastly, Amazon Prime, which I share with my husband, and my share is £1.20 a week. I usually wouldn't have a subscription like this, but it is so hard to get a hold of things like physically in London. Like, I don't want to be trekking out like an hour to a Westfield to pick something up. So this is much easier. You get things delivered, and we really do get like our value's worth of the subscription. Right, now we are into the fun stuff, which is variable costs. And look, we're just gonna get the most embarrassing part out of the way. I told you I spend too much money on food, and so this week I spent £116.20 on eating out, and I don't know how I feel about that. I need to reflect on my decisions, I think. That covered 4 coffee and pastry runs, 2 work lunches, 3 pub trips, 1 dinner out, which was kind of at like, I guess, like a mid-range place, and then quite a few sort of like miscellaneous snacks throughout the week, usually a sweet snack at about 3 p.m. on a work day. I actually very rarely eat out for dinner. It's only like on the odd occasion when I'm seeing a friend. We usually eat dinner at home. But what does add up for me are like the coffee runs and the pastry runs and the work lunches. I work from home quite a lot, and so I really like to break up the day by going out to get something for lunch and then going and sitting in a park. I find it's a really important part of my routine, so it is something I will probably like continue to spend money on. But I'll give you an idea of some of the typical costs for food in London. So coffee or a latte for me is about £4. Work lunches are between sort of like £7 to £10 depending on where you're buying, and similarly, like if you're going to a pub, it'll be like £6 to £7 for a pint or a cider, depending on the pub that you go to. And now I'll talk you through a couple of more discretionary budgets that I have. The first is like just a fun budget, so I put £50 a week into this, and this is like no questions asked spending, so it'll be things like beauty or like clothing or like when I need to get a haircut. It's one of those budgets that I either won't spend any of it at all in a month, or like in a month where I need to get a haircut, I'll spend quite a bit of it. And secondly is our travel budget. Now, it was a really important priority for me and my husband when we moved to be able to travel more. That's why we moved our entire life from New Zealand to like across the world. So we actively prioritize this in our discretionary spending, and each week I put £75 into this budget, and that allows us to have a trip for a couple of days anywhere like in Europe or the UK every 2 to 3 months or so, which works for our lifestyle. And it also covers our train travel within the UK, so when we need to go and see my family or go away for a weekend, we take the money out of that pool. And it's nice because train travel does get expensive in the UK, so setting money aside for that I find is really important. Next up, we've got tickets and events, which is all part of the amazingness of like living in London. And I will say, these can get expensive, but on the flip side, you can also do them really cheaply because a lot of small bands come here. You have so many like smaller plays and art exhibitions you can go to. So I really only tend to spend about £10 per week on this, which will very easily get me like a movie ticket a month and then going to a small gig each month as well, which is more than enough for me. Thank you very much for listening to me babble on about how I spend too much money on coffee, but let's get to the point, which is how much does it actually cost for this 27-year-old to live in London per week? And the answer is £638. And I fully recognise that this is going to mean different things to different people, especially if you are used to living in a smaller town with a much lower cost of living as well. Generally, is London more expensive to live in? Yeah, it is. But is it worth it for me at this stage of life? 100% yes. It is an investment for me that has allowed me to like exponentially accelerate my career, start a side business, and just generally build a life that leaves me incredibly content right now. And I know I'm incredibly lucky to have that opportunity to do so. But if you guys have any more questions about what it's like living in London, or any ideas for types of content you would like to see me make, let me know. Any questions in the comments, and in the meantime, check out what it actually costs to move to London, which is like a whole nother kettle of fish. I will put my video up here and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!